Former Prime Minister Scott Morrison is declaring that he won't resign from Parliament over the secret ministry scandal, arguing he kept his powers secret because he feared that they would be misunderstood. Joining us live now is the Shadow Home Affairs Minister, Karen Andrews. Karen, good to see you. So we saw yesterday Scott Morrison mounted his defence. Did it change your view that he should resign from Parliament?
Look, I made my statements a couple of days ago, and I can assure you that I have not changed my view in relation to what I said a couple of days ago. So ultimately, it is a decision for Scott Morrison what he chooses to do with his future. For me, transparency is incredibly important. And I'm very disappointed that we're having to talk about transparency issues at a time that I think we should be reinforcing the great work that was done during the COVID pandemic by the coalition government, and quite frankly, the work that was done by Scott Morrison, by Josh Frydenberg, by Greg Hunt and many others was, I believe, second to none. It was an outstanding effort. I'd much rather be talking about that rather than a transparency issue, which we seem to be embroiled in now. But I do think it's good we've had the line drawn in the sand by Peter Dutton. He's made it very clear that that would not happen if he were to be elected as Prime Minister, which I hope happens in a couple of years' time. So I think the line in the sand is there now, and we need to focus on the future and make sure that we put in place the proper processes to ensure that that can't happen again. Has
Scott Morrison called you to apologise?
No, but look, I understand that he's made a broad apology to his colleagues, and I'm entirely fine with that. So it's not an issue with me.
What does that mean, a broad apology? So when he says that he has spoken individually to the ministers affected, that's not the case.
Well, he hasn't spoken to me. The last discussion that I had with Scott Morrison was during the last sitting week in Canberra.
Are you disappointed by that at all?
No, look, he has his views and he has his way of managing things. I'm fine.
Just checking something, because he said the fact that ministers were unaware of these things is actually proof of my lack of interference. That's one of the quotes that's got a lot of publicity yesterday. Does that wash with you?
Look, I don't know. I still probably don't really understand the rationale behind it, because if you look at putting in place contingencies, that's always a good thing to do. So I would never have had an issue with contingencies being put in place, but they needed to be done in a manner that was transparent, and that went towards good governance. So I would never have had an issue with contingencies being put in place, and nor would I in the future. In fact, one of the things that I talk about very regularly is the need to make sure that there are contingencies for various eventualities.
On the 5th of May last year, Karen, you gave an interview in which you said the Biloela family may soon be released into community detention on Christmas Island. The very next day, Morrison was secretly sworn into your portfolio. Is there a link between the two?
Look, not as far as I'm aware, and I think that we need to look at who ultimately had responsibility for that, and that sat with the Immigration Minister. Now, without a doubt, I was the Senior Minister as the Home Affairs Minister at the time, but the decision-making really sat with the Immigration Minister. So there were a lot of things. I was new into the role. We were exploring what a range of options would be. I was getting briefed from my department on a range of issues. But in terms of what happened with that family, that sat with the Minister for Immigration.
But you could have ultimately approved the family's visa status here in Australia, right?
Yes, as the Senior Minister in the portfolio, I could have intervened, but I have a very strong that people should take responsibility for their own areas. And that's why I generally did not intervene in any of the decisions that were being made. I might have given advice and guidance to the other ministers that were in the Home Affairs portfolio on a range of different matters.
So is it entirely plausible that Scott Morrison could have been worried that you would ultimately approve the family's visa status here in Australia and then stepped in like he did on PEP 11?
Look, I don't know. I really don't know, so I can't answer that. That would be a question for you to put to Scott Morrison. I don't recall there being a discussion with him directly on or about that time. I genuinely don't. So I
Okay.
would be surprised if that was an issue.
Did he overrule you at any time in the year or so that he was co-Home Affairs Minister?
Look, not that I'm aware of. We would have robust discussions from time to time, as you would expect. And I'm very happy to be up for a robust discussion because I think that that often brings out the best resolution to any issues. And look, and I respect the position of the Prime Minister. So obviously I would listen to the views of the Prime Minister at the time, but I don't believe that there was any action to override a decision that I made.
Well, you certainly got the views of the Prime Minister on election day because he called you about the Sri Lankan asylum seeker boat. What did he say, Karen?
Well, it was a very transactional discussion. I've got to say it didn't last for very long, and it was really, this is what he would like to be done, which is the very sit rep style report from Operation Sovereign Borders, pretty much saying that this is what had happened, the boat had been intercepted, and to make sure that the opposition was briefed. I don't have any issues with that. And if you look at transparency, I think it was the right thing to do at the time because it was unprecedented that a boat was intercepted on election day. And as I've said since then, if I had not disclosed that, or if he had not disclosed that, there would have been very different discussions afterwards about, well, how can you argue for transparency when on election day a boat was intercepted and you didn't reveal it?
As fate would have it, though, he was also Home Affairs Minister on that day. So how do you reflect on that?
Well, I suppose the positive way to look at it is that he spoke to me as the Home Affairs Minister. He made it clear what his preferred course of action was going to be. I agreed with him and was immediately just on to actioning it.
Right. But, I mean, I suppose he could have just called the departments and instead of you.
Well, he could have.
But didn't.
I don't know. There were undoubtedly a lot of discussions happening on that day, and I was involved, as I've just said, in those discussions with the Prime Minister, and the action was taken accordingly.
What were the robust discussions that you had with him about?
Oh, well, they could have been over a range of things. We had some fairly robust discussions about manufacturing at the days that I was putting together the manufacturing a strategy, and he wanted to make sure that we were doing our best to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and look at what the eventualities should be. And I can assure you that he was very actively engaged in what was happening with the manufacturing strategy, which I thought was fantastic.
Did you disagree on anything?
Oh, look, not that I would put my I could talk to you about it at the moment. I mean, he was very conscious of making sure that we were rebuilding manufacturing here in Australia. I was very keen to do that as well too. Probably I wanted more money than I ultimately got, because I said that there's, in my view, we should be funding large sums of money so that it's worthwhile and businesses can actually build, and that's you've seen that in the strategy.
Okay, I'm out of time, but I do want to ask you, Claire O'Neill, she's got a speech up today and she's warning that school kids are being radicalised. I mean, you'd be well across this in your former portfolio. How prevalent is this?
Look, I think that it's certainly something that we all need to be very conscious of. It's public knowledge that the number of people who are engaged in terrorism-type activities, whether they're just gathering information or whether they're being influenced by what is happening, the ages of those people are getting younger and younger. So I think it's very important that everything that we possibly can do to prevent people being radicalised, particularly at young ages, is critical. So I'm very interested in hearing what the Home Affairs Minister has to say about that. I can tell you that she will have my full cooperation to look at what solutions we need to take.
Right, that's the Shadow Home Affairs Minister, Karen Andrews. Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.